On a snowy evening, when white flakes swirled quietly outside the window, the little girl clung to her grandmother, not wanting to fall asleep. Curiosity shone in her eyes and she waited for a story. Her grandmother stroked her hair, sighed, and began a long story from her life. In one city there lived an outstanding inventor. His name was known to everyone, because he created marvelous mechanisms that seemed to animate. However, his most unusual creation was a human figure with blades instead of hands. But even stranger was the fact that the inventor endowed him with a mind that could comprehend the world around him and a heart that could feel. But unfortunately, the inventor did not have time to complete his creation and died, leaving him alone in the world. So Edward appeared, a man with scissors instead of hands, doomed to loneliness. One day, a woman in an elegant purple suit appeared in town. She went from house to house, offering her clients miraculous cosmetics. That's how she reached a strange mansion. The house was in semi-darkness and frozen time. Suddenly there was a barely perceptible sound in the silence. The woman froze. In the far corner of the attic, among the shadows, a silhouette moved. A slow, cautious step, and a tall figure emerged from the darkness. She discerned a lean face, thin features, long fingers ending in gleaming blades. There was no threat in his eyes, only timidity and expectation, so she was not afraid of the stranger. The woman led him into her home, where the soft light of the lamps and the warmth of the familiar walls were unfamiliar to him. There, among the many photographs, his gaze lingered on one snapshot. It was of a girl, and her image evoked in him something new, strange and warm, like the first ray of sunshine after a long winter. He did not yet know what love was. That same evening at the family dinner, Edward sat down at the table, where he was looked at with apprehension and delight. He awkwardly tried to pick up his fork, but his every gesture caused difficulty. When the house was quiet, Edward lay in a soft bed for the first time in his life, covered by a warm blanket. At dawn, the town came to life, the streets filled with voices. Edward saw a man trimming bushes and decided to help him. As it turned out, he was a professional at it. In a few minutes, he had deftly cut a green dinosaur out of the bushes. Inspired, he started on the next figure. Soon the doorbell rang. The neighbors, full of curiosity, gathered outside the house. They insisted on having a barbecue in honor of the unusual guest. The whole day was spent in preparation. In the evening, the guests had already gathered in the yard. In the light of the lanterns, the men looked at Edward with smiles, talking among themselves. But one of them patted him on the shoulder and told him firmly that he shouldn't think of himself as an invalid. Everyone had their own peculiarities. That evening, Kim returned to the house after a party with her friends. She entered the room, turned on the lamp, and immediately cried out. The mirror across the hall reflected a black silhouette frozen in the corner. Edward, startled by her scream, flinched. Peg comforted her daughter, and Bill took Edward into the other room, where he placed a glass of rum in front of him. He laughed, noticing the wary look in his eyes, and offered to drink through a straw. The next day Esmeralda invited Edward into her garden. He brought out 2 swans. Over time, people realized that the scissors in Edward's hands were more than just a tool for creating artisanal sculptures. Soon, ladies with dogs were lining up, and then the owners themselves, hoping for a new hairstyle. Peg, inspired by his craftsmanship, also decided to get a haircut. Thus began a new chapter in Edward's life. But the journey was just beginning, and there were tests ahead of him that would show him if he could be a part of this world. The next day, he and a woman went into the city to work. Upon returning home, he catches Kim and her boyfriend trying to open the door. Finding that she doesn't have a key, he opens the door with his hand, much to the surprise of Kim's boyfriend. The next day Edward and Peg find themselves in the spotlight. They are invited to a television show. The audience, hungry for sensation, floods him with questions. Edward feels very uncomfortable with such attention, accidentally touches the microphone, and his body shudders with an electric shock. The next day Esmeralda, a woman with a sly smile and bad intentions, brings Edward to the beauty parlor. She offers to buy it for her business, but her true goals are far more insidious. In the back room, smelling of paint and varnish, she tries to seduce him by entering on horseback and stripping naked. But fate, as if protecting the innocent Edward, intervenes. A chair topples over with a clatter, and Esmeralda, embarrassed and frustrated, is left with nothing. Edward, not fully realizing what has happened, leaves the salon, leaving her alone. Meanwhile, Jim, Kim's boyfriend, is up to no good. He convinces Edward to help him steal from his own parents. Kim, wavering between guilt and a desire to please Jim, joins their risky plan. Using his incredible hands, Edward picks the locks on Jim's house, but their plans are foiled. An alarm goes off and the gang leaves Edward to fend for himself. The police arrest him and he ends up in a cell, alone and uncomprehending. Peg and Bill, having learned of what has happened, rush to his aid. Thanks to his lawyer, the court declares him insane and releases him. But news of his arrest quickly spreads through the neighborhood. People who yesterday admired his talents now regard him with suspicion. Edward, with his childlike naivete and kind heart, does not understand why the world he has tried so hard to understand has turned its back on him. Adding fuel to the fire, Esmeralda, to avenge him for that day, spreads a sinister rumor in the neighborhood. Everyone picks up the rumor and starts spreading strange gossip about it. All is quiet at Peg's house as they prepare for Christmas. Kim walks outside and freezes in amazement. A magical spectacle unfolds before her. Edward, like a magician, creates a breathtaking ice sculpture. Kim, overcome with childlike joy, begins to dance around the snow, but Jim's sudden scream interrupts the moment. Edward, startled, accidentally scratches Kim's palm. Peg leads her daughter into the house to treat the wound, but Jim takes advantage of the moment and pushes Edward out of the yard. Seeing this, she breaks up with Jim, finally disappointed in him. Kim puts her arms around him to comfort him. Edward, exhausted and lonely, falls back into sleep. He dreams of the inventor who gave him artificial hands. In his dream, he cuts off his fingers and palms as he watches his father fall dead. He wakes up terrified, fearing he might hurt Kim. Meanwhile, Jim and his drunken friend drive through town and nearly run over Kevin, Kim's younger brother. Edward rushes to save the boy, but in the commotion accidentally injures him in the face. Jim, seeing this, accuses Edward of assault. The neighbors, hearing the commotion, come out into the street, and a policeman begins to chase Edward. He has no choice but to return to his mansion. Kim, unable to leave Edward, follows him into the gloomy mansion. She doesn't suspect that Jim, gripped by rage, is following in her footsteps. In the attic, Jim tries to kill Edward, but Kim stops him. Jim pushes the girl, which enrages Edward. Edward, seeing this, stabs Jim with one of his blades. He falls to the ground, and Kim confesses her love to Edward with a tremor in her voice. When everyone gathered reaches the mansion, Kim deceives them by showing them the fake corpse of Edward's hand. She says that Jim and Edward died in a duel. The crowd, believing her, parts ways. Grandma finishes her story by confessing that she is Kim. She never saw Edward again, but believes he is immortal. This is where the movie ends. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and like the channel. See you soon.